third of the way up from the pin, there are going to be 2 or 3 boats that nail it, tack to port, and cross us. And we say, nice job. But then we can play the next shift as well. And that's kind of what we teach to our college sailors as we race for the series and not for the win in that race. Because to win a race, you have to take some risks. Okay? In this, does that make sense, everybody? Okay. So in here, in this first thing, we're going to do some practice starts. Oh, and by the way, I say 3-minute sequence. We talked about it. We'll do the standard 5-minute sequence like you guys will race tomorrow, so forget the 3-minute sequence. But when we get out there, we need to prepare for the start just like we would any other part of the race. We want to get an idea where the ley line is to the committee boat. We want to get an idea where the ley line is to the leeward end of the starting line. And what we do is kind of look at something on shore, trees or houses or cars or whatever, so we know where that is. Because at the weather end of the starting line, we don't want to be above that ley line. Because 2 things. One, all we need is one boat that nails that ley line and ends up right below us, and they can shut us out. And then we're just sitting here luffing. We might have to tack around. We might have to wait till 2 or 3 boats go through in front of us that have laid the ley line. Then we're automatically in the 3rd row. And what's our only bailout? It's to tack, right? Yeah. So we're going to tack to the right, and what's the deal? Then we better be hoping that that right side of the race course is going to be the only way that's going to work, because now we own it, you know. People say we're going to start late at the committee boat and then tack. They better be super, super confident that the right's going to really pay. So that makes me makes me nervous just talking about that. So we'd rather be a third of the way down, third of the way up, and know where these ley lines are. In here we talk about avoid starting outside the box. So what we're talking about here is if the starting line's a box and we have boats that line up, and we all know who we are, and we do that, and we line up here to weather of the committee boat, and there can't be anything more dangerous. Dangerous meaning to get a good start when we're up in here, because we've talked about that. We can't get in, and we're forced to the right side of the course. And we actually do drills with our team where we stand and yell at them if they get outside this box. And they like to do that because they like to kind of try to squeeze it in there. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And in their mind, this is practice, but they got to practice a conservative start. So what we got to remember, the goal on a good start is that in my mind, we're able to use the first shift, right? So if we have a lousy start and we tack to the right, we might get lucky and hit the first shift to the right, but chances are it's not going to work that way. Whereas if we have a good start, third of the way down, third of the way up, depending on which way the wind is, then we have the opportunity to hit the first shift, and we're in the game. You know, there are going to be other boats that are going to be ahead of us, but hopefully they will get to an edge and kind of slowly fade off. Does that make sense? Anybody? What do you think, Ryan? Is that anything? So, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't exactly catch. I was looking down when you were talking about the box. Where are you saying?
Oh, like when we with our, yeah, just literally a box, like down like this, so that the team, when we practice,
okay.
I forget, we have a consequence if they go outside the box in here. I forget what it is, but it's not fun. And they are sailing outside the ley line of the committee boat. So it's the same thing. So we would love to see that be the rule today. Can we just work on that? Nobody goes outside the box? And it's a little different. Let's just know that that's going to be part of our approach. So any questions on this stuff that we talked about? Yeah.
Well, the ley line, the box, is it kind of slant with the ley line?
Yeah, ideally it would be, I guess we should call it a trapezoid, right? Would that be the deal? It comes out like this. You're right. But when we do this with a team, we don't want them in here because it's real dangerous, and we'd rather have them close, but on the ley line. But you're right, it would technically be more like this. But this almost dictates an approach that I would love to see us work on. And let me back up and say this first. I think starting can be really, stressful if we don't have a plan or we don't have an approach that we're comfortable using and we know every single time how we're going to set up for the start. And different people have different methods, different approaches. And, it's funny, I can tell you right now exactly, if I was going to go out and sail Flying Scott tomorrow, exactly how I would approach the start. And that would be, at a couple minutes, I would be at the leeward end of the line on port, approaching on port underneath the fleet that was luffing there, because it gives me the flexibility to tack into a hole that we see developing. Or if we decide that the weather end is favored, we can go up till we're a third of the way down and tack into a hole there. But if we line up on starboard luffing, we're pretty much locked in to that position, until that, all the way from whenever we start on starboard, which many people do at 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes till the start. Whereas if we approach on port and we tack into that hole at 40 seconds or so, it gives us that flexibility. We can tack earlier down here if we see a nice hole. We can tack later up here into a hole. Okay, does that make sense? Everybody see what I'm talking about? Now, having said that, let me just preface it by saying, but if that's not your bag, you don't like sailing underneath the boats when they're on starboard coming at you, sometimes you have to close your eyes because it looks kind of scary, then I would do the starboard luffing approach, but I would use the same approach every single time. So the only variable becomes timing, because if you want to be down near the leeward end or up at the weather end, all we're doing is setting up and using the same exact approach. That's what I mean when I said I know how I would start up if I was going to do that. Then we don't have to really think about it, and it becomes very mechanical. Yeah.
Well, could you also come down the line on starboard looking for holes?
Yeah.
You have to do it on port?
Yeah, no, you mean like kind of rev it up and come underneath the group and do this?
Yeah.
You can. The issue only is that as all these boats are sitting there, luffing, you're in their bad air, and it's you can do that. It's where that's really difficult is if it's light air, because you are going to have a hard time going much faster than they are to find the hole. If you do that early enough, 2 minutes or a little more, that'll give you enough time. It's just a little tougher.
But on the port, you don't have the same bad air?
Because you're going kind of against the grain, so the breeze is coming off their sails like that, yeah. But there are a lot of people that do exactly what you're saying, and it works out really well. I just think it's what I would try to find as we do these practice starts. So we said we're going to do 2 practice starts, and then we'll do this up and down drill that we'll talk about here in a second. So when we do these practice starts, please use the time to think about an approach. Ooh, that didn't work so good. Let me do this a little different and try to find one that works for you. Yeah.
Hey Greg, I want to ask you, when you're coaching Charleston, do you have them do time, speed, distance, things with buoys, or can people do? I used to do that by you may want to talk about that.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Explain it, Ryan, what you mean by the time.
Well, if you guys go out by yourself sometime with your crew, just practicing, find a buoy or set a life jacket on anchor. And I can't recommend this enough. And just go out there and set your watch for like 3 minutes and practice arriving at that buoy or mark full speed at 0. And I think you'll be really shocked at how difficult it is in the beginning. A lot of times you'll be coming in early or you'll be coming in late. And you start to get a feeling of how to accelerate, right, Greg?
Oh, yeah.
Accelerate so that you can judge where the line is and also slow your boat down if you come in early and use your rudder and kind of slow down. And buy yourself some space so that you can be accelerating when you come to that.
That is great practice.
You guys do it all the time.
Yeah, no, that is great practice, and it really makes sense. I got asked once to drive an Etchells. A friend of mine asked me to sail his Etchells in Miami. He couldn't be there, so I got there a day early, and I did exactly what Ryan's talking about, because I had never sailed a big, heavy keel boat like that. And I'll tell you, when it was 5 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1 second. The mark was literally like 3 lengths behind us, so it took me a long time to get used to the fact that those things carry forever. But, like what Ryan's saying, it's almost a good practice drill to do anytime you go out there, because if it's blowing 5, that timing's going to be way different than if it's blowing 15. And you do that one time, before the start of a race. That's why you get out there, 20 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes early. You'll get really comfortable with how hard you have to hit the gears to get the boat going, right? I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
One thing I'm a little confused about, unlike your port, and you're looking for these holes, you're not necessarily trying to come in and then have a full speed start. You might have to luff up in there a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and again, this is just what I found works for me. So there, like I say, find an approach, and all I'd suggest is trying to use it the same approach all the time. But you're right. When we make that tack from port to starboard, it's still at 40 seconds, or 50 seconds, a minute, depending on the boat, I guess you'd say, and the breeze. But this tack that we make from port to starboard is very, very slow. And actually, it's interesting. I'll stay on the old windward side as we tack. So I'm watching the boat, so I go as close to them as I dare. I'm not trying to create a foul situation or anything like that. But the closer we get to them and the more controlled our speed is when we complete our tack, bam, we are in complete control. They can't get over the top of us. They can't accelerate away from us. We've done a nice job of effectively making them our blocker for the boats to weather. But that tack is very slow and controlled, and I'll just stay on the old weather side, the new leeward side, until we're all the way across the eye of the wind, and then luffing, and then we're on starboard underneath them, and then I'll get up to the high side. Just what works for me, but that way I can get really close to them and get control.
And then when you get close to the start, you bear off a little bit. And take off.
Exactly. So we still have a lot of time. Yeah, Tyler?
Do you want to talk a little bit about developing a hole? And my question is, for the boat to windward, how to manage when somebody takes your hole, or how to protect your hole, and if somebody takes your hole, how to handle the situation. My question, Greg, is how to handle the situation if somebody comes in below me, how to handle the situation if somebody comes in above me.
Okay. Well, first, let's talk about what would be ideal at the start, an ideal position if this is the weather boat, and let's be the leeward boat, and this is it's like heaven, right? I mean, it's like we've done it all. If we're like this, below the boat to weather, and the boat to leeward of us is down in here, we've done it right. We've hit the gas right. We've got a nice distance to leeward, so we can put the nose down, put the bow down, and accelerate. That's cool. And we're close to this guy, so he can't do that, right? And he's going to eventually fade out and either have to tack or slow down the boat to weather him, and life is good. It doesn't work that way all the time, but that's what we shoot for, right? So taking what Tyler's saying, when this boat is sitting here luffing on the line, it's how we initially set up underneath him, I think, is really important, or makes a big difference in how we have the opportunity to accelerate. And it's funny, I used to think, and I used to say, when we go through this port tack approach and we would tack underneath, ideally, we'd want to come out with our bow a little bit ahead of that boat's bow. And that sounded good because we're in control. But the problem with that is, all of a sudden, we're not in control, because if the line's here, we've restricted when we can accelerate in relation to that boat. You know what I mean? When we put our bow out like that, frankly, he has now, because he's maybe has 5 feet behind us, he can trim in that much earlier to get over the top of us. It's funny, and I've been saying this all along, and then finally it was Zeke, who sails with us in the Lightning, who said, that's not really how you do it. Watch how you do it. Because when you do that, you get shot out the back. So he said, watch, and sure enough, as he pointed out, we tack so we're a little bit behind that boat to weather. And I think this is kind of an important part. Not in his bad air so that we can never trim in and accelerate, but we're just behind him a little bit so that we can hit the gas before he can. And it's funny, when I started thinking about it that way, it made all the difference in our starts. And it was Zeke that pointed that out. So, when we approach, whether we're coming in from starboard into here, or whether we're coming into port, tack, so that our bow is just a little bit aft of, say, their mast, and we're hanging in there, so they still can't bear off and get over our bow, right? And they still can't accelerate, but we got them kind of locked up. And then when it's time to go fast, we can trim, and he can't because he's that much closer to the line. Does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah, that limits the timing of his acceleration, because if he accelerates too soon, he goes over early, and you've got that extra distance that you can start accelerating and pull out.
Exactly, exactly. So that made a big difference in my starting, to be honest with you. And then what Tyler's talking about, and this kind of goes back to where we were going earlier. So if we're sitting here luffing on the line, and a starboard tacker is tearing along underneath, and let's say we've done a nice job of creating a hole here, and we look at him and he's got his eyes on our hole that we've worked so hard to create, what's our defense? And it's really our only defense. What can we do? Right. Put the bow down. Got to be careful that we don't trim the sails in too much as we do that, because we'll definitely close the hole off. But just lay across the hole a little bit with the sails luffing. And remember, he's going fast. He doesn't have a whole lot of time. He's going to say to himself, forget it, I'm not going to mess with that. He's going to go on past. And that'll work well to defend. And the important thing is to watch as soon as he has gone past that point of no return where you can't stick it in there, then we quickly stick the boat back up into the wind so that we can start to open that hole up again. What's the best way to make
the hole have you lost in that procedure, though?
You can lose a lot, So it's interesting you say that. One thing that we think about when we practice starts in college sailing is not try to get, if I could put it this way, too fancy and make too big a hole, because you're inviting other boats to come in. Whereas if you keep it just as tight as you dare, so the real art becomes figuring out how to accelerate without putting the bow down a lot, then you can really maintain it. I think in a lot of the sailing though that we do, and Scots and Thistles and Lightnings and stuff, that hole that we would create would have to be pretty big for somebody to be encouraged to go in there. Whereas if we have a boat width, that's a nice size hole, and somebody's going to really have to force it to get inside there. But it's funny, in the college sailing stuff, people aren't afraid to stick their bow in there and kind of like a wedge and just kind of push them out of the way, They have the right to do that, but it makes it really hard. But does that make sense, that laying across the hole? Even on a day like today when it's windy, we can do that. But I guess the point is just being careful that we don't make the boat accelerate too much, because then we'll go right down to this boat and burn up our hole. And if this guy sees that happen, and then what he'll do is say, oh, thank you very much, and go right up to weather where you were, and now he's got a nice hole. Okay, any questions on that? Is that, Tyler, what you're thinking? Is that?
Yeah, no, that's definitely, that's a great tip of what Zeke said. I'm so happy to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that against
Oh, it made, use it against him. I heard this. Yeah.
Well, you have someone coming in, a swooper, as you call it in one of your old YouTube videos.
Oh, yeah.
They're moving in a lot faster. It's 10 seconds to the start, and you've gone down to block them. You're moving a lot slower. They're screaming leeward at you. And I've been told my defense is to say I need time and opportunity to come up. Is that a good enough defense?
Not so much. Not so much. They've kind of, yeah. I really don't talk very fast here. You know what helps that is your teammates. Somebody has to be looking behind and saying, oh man, here comes Bill tearing on, he's going to go for our hole, That's the only way you can defend against that. Because then if you look back and Bill knows you're looking at him and you bear off, he knows you're going to defend. So communication at the start, I think, is even more important than any other time in the race. Makes a big difference. So talking about it, so when you see the swooper kind of come tearing away down, and you know he's out of plays. That's the other side of the coin. You know, he's only got so many cards left. He's got to either stick it in that hole that you're trying to create, or he's got to go on by and find somewhere else, and he's got to make that decision. And I think if he knows you're looking at him and you put the bow down even just a little bit, he knows he's got a fight on his hands. And he, you know, if he's smart, he won't go for that because it's too dangerous for both of you to get out of there with a good start. Is that fair? Was that what you guys would say?
Absolutely, and that's, you know, part of the reason I asked the question was because with your approach, if you're coming in on port, then when you tack, you have to slow down and you're tacking into your hole. But if you're coming down on starboard and you're up to speed and somebody says lured boat, now you have to come head to wind with all that speed and it's going to carry you over the line. You have no other place to go. So by either luffing or by coming in on port like Greg was suggesting, you don't run the risk of having somebody bring you up from leeward and taking you over the line.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because if that guy's going really fast and he says, hey, you know, room, or, you know, come on up, you can just sit there, you know, fly right by and go past and over the line and say, see you later, you know.
Right,
You're right.
no excuse about being too slow because you're up to speed, so you have all the steerage in the world, and it should be like that. So
Yeah.
slow and steady wins the race. I like to approach the line just barely moving, but not letting the boat stop moving, of course, so that my rudder is still working. And I use my sails to control the boat too, because I'm not moving fast, so that I maintain my rights and my control of the start. And so I don't have a lot of rudder flow. So when I need to come down, I just tell my crew to jib in, and I use the jib room to bow down so I can accelerate the hole. And then when I want to come up, I make sure, hopefully not yelling, that my jib's luffing, and I come up on the main because I don't have any, again, because I'm going too slow to have the steerage that
Explain that some more, Tyler, because I think that's a real important part of when we're maneuvering at the start. And like you said, you don't want to be going too fast because all of a sudden you lose the ability to hold your spot.
All right, well, I know Zeke's starting method now, so I'll share mine. So, you know, we have the pin, the starting boat, of course. Give it a square course. And, you know, so we have all these boats here, 33 this weekend pre-registered. And so the slow approach gives us control because we don't have all the speed that can take us up over the line if somebody calls us from leeward. So either coming in on port and then tacking into a hole, or just luffing up to the line slowly. But either way, at 30 seconds, I think that we should be established on the line, right? I mean, at 30, we were talking about timing, when to pull the trigger. In light air, you know, I'm pulling the trigger at 30 seconds if it's really a drifter. So say at 30 seconds, I actually want to be, if I'm in here, I'm controlling my boat with my sails, and what I'm doing by having the boat at this angle is protecting my hole. So that I can just pull in, even if I do come to a stop again, I try not to, I can just trim my main in, and not only am I going to start to move again, but when I trim the main in, just like when I sail upwind and pull the main in, the boat drives up. It's going to drive up and create this hole. It drives the boat up, forward to windward. Now I have this hole, but then I see somebody coming in down here, barging, and I know I want to protect my hole, so I luff my main again, and I quickly ask my crew to pull the jib in and reestablish my protective angle. And then, you know, if it's blowing hard, then I pull the trigger at 7 seconds, boom, we're going. If it's medium, then at 15 seconds we pull the trigger, and if it's light, we pull the trigger at 25. So, but by approaching the line slowly and controlling with the sails is what I came up here to talk about.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yep.
that's super. Because
How
it's
far off the line are you at this point?
Well, I'll tell you what. Don't worry about that as much. Although it's great to have a crew that can tell you 1 boat length, 2 boat lengths. But like Greg was saying, just be behind this guy until the last minute, and you don't have to worry about it because they're going to call him over, not you.
yeah. But then at the
2 boat lengths, 1 boat length. I probably approach the line at 55 seconds. I'm on the line, luffing my sails, and 3 boat lengths from the line. I try to keep it up there, and because I'm just gonna sit here and luff. You know, my boat's not going anywhere until somebody tries to take my hole.
That's great. That's great. That's super. Thanks, Tyler.
You're welcome.
Ryan, anything you want to add?
Well, I just say that none of this is hard and fast. I mean, you have to Like, I love Zeke's idea, but I would be a little nervous. Like Greg's really good at pulling the trigger a little bit ahead of that guy, because if you don't, you're gonna get rolled. Or sometimes we might see some people that are really eager beavers in their way. They're going too fast, and more times than not, in regattas, I find myself saying, go ahead. You see people, they start they're barging down the line. Keep going, you're fine. Just go ahead and just cross in front of me. I don't want to teach people that.
You know, that's a good point, what Ryan's saying there. A lot of times, we like to call them the mad reachers, you know, that they get up high on the line, and they've hit the gas without anywhere to go necessarily, and they're just tearing down the line. And our instinct says, stick it up and hold those guys up. But like Ryan's saying, let sails left go on by, because they're not going to be able to become a problem soon because they're going to be gone. Then we can trim in and go up using what Tyler's talking about, using our sails.
And I would be nervous if that guy that you're talking about might pull the trigger early, and then you're really kind of...
Yeah.
It depends on who...
Yeah.
You're the one who coined the term marshmallow.
Marshmallow, yeah. So yeah, I'll tell you a quick story on that here in a second. But the thing that I think makes all these work is the teamwork in the boat. Like, I like to think at the start, I'm just doing what I'm told. And because my wife is the one that's calling a lot of this stuff, I'm used to it. It's easy, you know. But truly, in that last 15 seconds, she and/or Zeke or whoever's in the boat with us is watching this boat. They're watching these boats that are swooping behind. They're watching the port tackers. And by this time, at 15 seconds, usually those guys have made their move. But they're watching, and if they say, he's starting to trim, I hit the gas. It doesn't matter where we are, because otherwise, then Ryan's right, you get mowed down, and then you're shot out the back, and your start's cooked. But knowing when these boats to weather are trimming, and if we're doing our job and we're setting up and trimming the main and all that, we can't tell, right? There's just no way. And if we're looking, we're not doing our job here. So the crew has to be the one, and frankly, we have to kind of educate them on exactly what we're looking for when these boats are starting to trim. It's not just, oh, they're going fast, because it's too late. It's when we see the skipper first start to trim the main, and then we hit the gas. Doesn't matter after that. We don't want to be over the line early, but we don't want that boat to get over the top of us too. Is that good, guys? So one last thing on this starting stuff is the actual going through the gears to make the boat go fast and accelerate. And Tyler touched on this about the timing, and obviously you heard that. It was interesting. Light air, what'd you say, 25 seconds, 20 seconds?
Yeah, I mean, light air, I think we should all be barging really, because it just doesn't, I mean, I don't come in at a reach, but we should all be going upwind at 20 seconds, just, you know, up to speed, because otherwise you run the risk of totally stopping. And if you're in bad air, totally stopped, then it's going to be a couple minutes before you can get across the line, because, you know, we're selling some drifters sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes. So let me ask you guys. So we're sitting here, you know, and like Tyler said, we're barely moving. Let's say there's no boats around us. We've got a nice hole. We're just barely moving. We're down to 20 seconds, 18 seconds. It's blowing about 12. What's our routine here to get the boat up to speed? Do we just start trimming the sails in and pull them into close hauled, go for the weather sheet, trim the jib in, trim the main in, and go? Why? What happens if we do that?
We don't have any water over the board, so we're just going to be stuck.
Perfect. That's exactly right. So if we sit there and we do that, you know, we're sitting there luffing, and we go, oh, it's time to go, and we trim the sails in the way they look perfect in the pictures in the tuning guide, we are going to go sideways just as fast as we're going to go forward, and we'll be shot out the back. In fact, you know, a lot of times when we line up to start, if we end up, you know how you say, gosh, darn it, we ended up right on that guy's weather quarter again, you know? Often that's because we've trimmed in our sails, or maybe we've trimmed in our jib or whatever just a little bit too quickly, so the boat didn't get a chance to develop speed, get the flow over the board and over the rudder, and it just stalled and went sideways. So actually, that's all we really need to say. Is the moral of the story is here, it is no different than taking your car off, you know, a red light, except now it's automatic. In the old days, we had a shift, and if we missed first and we went right to second or third, we stopped, right? So it's the same deal. We got to give the boat time to build speed. depending on the boat, depending on the breeze, it could take longer or quicker. So that's good, but that's something to be very conscious of.
So you turn down and then trim in, you're saying?
Yeah, but we got to also be conscious of too is we don't want to turn down too much. I think sometimes we can give up a lot of distance by bearing off and putting the boat on a close reach, you know, and we'll certainly start rumbling along really quickly. But when we do that, we give up a lot of height, you know, or a lot, I shouldn't say height, obviously we give up height, but we give up a lot of that hole to leeward, and we can trim in and keep the boat just a little bit off a close hauled and go through the gears and hold that lane. And that's really the art. When you see somebody that's a really good starter and they're consistently in there, I think that ability to kind of trim through the gears without bearing off a whole bunch makes a big difference. Would you guys agree with that? So anyway, any questions on that?
Right, so you talked about what not to do. So on the boat, you've got the drawing right there.
Uh-huh.
What you would not do is trim in the sails from that position. You're saying you would turn down a little bit and then trim in the sails.
You would trim, so going back to what Tyler said, you might trim the jib a little bit. This is in the ideal world. We might trim the jib a little bit before the main because we're going real slow and the rudder ain't going to work real well. That'll pull the bow down for us.
Right.
Then we trim the main in. And again, in both situations, we're not going anywhere near close hauled. We're letting the boat get up to speed, and then we come back up. But my point is, which I just want to emphasize, is if we're luffing here, we don't want to turn down like this to get speed, just a little bit. You know, like a close reach, maybe 10 degrees from here, so that when we come back up, we don't give a whole bunch of that hole away.
So when my captain says trim for speed, I'm on the jib. I go first with the jib, and he should wait a beat or two, a second or two, or however long, before he trims in the lane.
Yeah, or he would.
Like a two thing, not all together now. Boom, here we go.
Yeah, or maybe to even fine tune that a little bit more, he would trim at the same time as you, but not as much, because you want the boat to accelerate as it's turning down. But you got it. Yeah, you got it. But I think the thing you got to be careful of is pulling it all the way into close hauled. And for speed, if that means close hauled, you know, top bat and straight back and all that, maybe that's a little tight right off the bat. Maybe give it a little bit of chance to get up to speed.
Okay.
Okay. So I didn't mean to, but actually this is real important stuff. Was this okay, you guys? Did I help? So the last thing,
It's just cold and windy out there.
it is kind of cold and windy, actually, but you know what, as we've been doing this, it's kind of laid down a little bit. Well, at least when you can't see the backside of the white caps. You know.
You gotta look out here.
Yeah. Okay, we won't look there then. But this will be good, because if you're going to have this tomorrow, this will be perfect. And you know what? We don't have to go out forever too, you guys, but I think if we go out and I'll tell you what we're going to do here in a second, but this will be good. We won't do anything crazy. We don't want to get anybody, you know, discouraged, and we want it to be fun. So we'll talk about it. Last thing, and it's this drill, that's this up and down drill that we have. Actually, we have a couple things here. Let me just go over this while we're talking about it. The stop and go drill, I think when it's blowing 18,